That is a 1982 Mercedes 300D. And let me tell you what, guys, it's the best Mercedes ever made. That is absurd. Now I want you guys to actually fight me in the comments below, but I truly do think that this era of Mercedes, the W123 platform, is the best they have ever made. And let me tell you why. They built over 2.7 million of these cars from the mid-70s through about the mid-1980s, depending on where you live in the entire world. Now let me explain the appeal of this car. If you live here in the United States and you've ever been in the back of a taxi cab or even in the back of a police car, chances are it's been a Ford Crown Victoria. They're durable, they're pretty reliable, they're relatively cheap to maintain, and they just won't die. Now if you go elsewhere, pretty much anywhere else in the entire world, this is the Ford Crown Victoria of Europe and even North Africa. The Mercedes 300D and the W123 series cars are just about indestructible. You see, back when this car was new, Mercedes-Benz was laser focused on precision engineering and laser focused on longevity and quality, even at the expense of things such as, well, let's say styling. If you look at design languages that other manufacturers use, Mazda uses Kodo, Cadillac uses something called Arts and Science. Mercedes back in the day, well, they used a design language I like to call car. Now here's what I'm talking about. If you were to ask your friend to draw you a car, and this person has never seen an automobile in their entire life, you'd probably tell them to do something like this. So you'd start with, maybe a couple of wheels like that, and then you'd explain to them that, well, there's a place where the engine goes, then there's a place where you sit inside, then there's one more place for your luggage. It's called a trunk. Now let's connect this all together, and you know what, maybe we'll smooth out some of the edges a little bit. And then how about some doors? Yeah, something like that. That looks fine. 4 doors. And then maybe a line across the middle for trim, a couple of door handles. Let's give it a nice headlight here. Sure, how about a tail light? That works. And then an emblem on the front. Yeah, what you've just drawn right there is a Mercedes 300D. There's not a whole lot to the design. Yeah, okay, so this Mercedes may not have a huge emphasis on exterior styling, but that doesn't matter at all, because what matters is what's under this ginormous piece of flat steel. Now, to open a hood on an old Mercedes, you have to pull a tab on the interior, and then there's this little handle that pops out of the grille. Pull that out, and up it goes to reveal magnificence. This is a 5-cylinder inline turbo diesel. It develops about 120 horsepower and maybe 170 pound-feet of torque, but it is an extraordinary piece of technology. Yeah, the diesel may not look like a lot underneath the hood of this Mercedes, but these engines are known for going well over 700,000 miles in between rebuilds. A lot of you guys in the last video I did commented that you've seen these engines with over 1 million kilometers on them with little difficulty, and that's because everything is built to such a high standard. It's a mechanical injection pump in this engine, so when the EMP strikes, you can run this engine without any electricity. You just need a little bit of compression, a little bit of somewhat vaguely flammable diesel stuff, and a little bit of air, and this engine will run, and it will keep running. Now, it's not exactly the most refined unit I've ever heard. I can actually simulate this engine perfectly without it even running. All you need is something like this thermos here, made out of metal, and a few pebbles. So, step 1, have the thermos in hand. Step 2, grab a handful of pebbles, fill the thermos with said pebbles. Step 3, seal it all up, and yeah, how many cars can you do that and call it an exact recreation of what it sounds like? So it's kind of hard for me to demonstrate just how well thought out this car is and how devoted Mercedes was towards durability back in this era of car, but there is a bunch of small things on this vehicle that'll show you what I mean. Take, for example, this hood. Now, if I need to fix this OM617 turbo diesel, which you never will because they don't break because they're simple and well made. But if it were to break, you gotta see that it's kind of hard to get to. I gotta lean over. There's this massive grill right in the way. But of course, Mercedes thought of that. There's actually a little lever down here by the hood mechanism. I pull the lever, the hood goes to nearly vertical. And now I have access to the entire engine bay completely unobstructed by the hood, so I can get to things way in the back of the engine toward the firewall. I can replace fuel filters, even injectors, without having to crouch underneath the hood. Another way I might be able to demonstrate this car's attention to detail is with this little piece of trim down the side. Now, nothing on this 300D is here without a purpose, and this piece of trim down the side is no exception. Yes, it's chrome and it may look nice, but it's actually here for a purpose. Now, when you're driving down the road and stuff comes splattering off your tire, you don't want it to get on the door handle because this is something that you're going to touch and use on a daily basis. So this little trim acts as kind of a guard against stuff flying off the front or rear wheel, which means that the door handle is always nice and clean. Another example of how this car was designed with a purpose is back here with these taillights. You'll notice how they are ribbed. Now, Mercedes did extensive testing on these back in the day, and they say that these ribbed taillights actually work better when the car is dirty. Plus, another advantage one of you guys pointed out is in direct sunlight, like right now, it creates little shadows in between these ridges, which means that it reduces glare on the tail lamp, and you can see it even in direct contact with bright light. If you need even more proof about Mercedes' dedication toward build quality with this car, let's take a look at this panel gap. This one is 37 years old, has about 150,000 miles, and the panel gaps on just about every panel are pretty much perfect. This is 37 years ago. The manufacturing processes weren't nearly as advanced as they are today, but let's see how it's worked on this example. So, at the top of this door seam, 5.3 millimeters. In the middle, 5.15 millimeters, and at the bottom, 5.37 millimeters. So roughly 5 to 5.3 down this entire gap, which is just absolute perfection, even by today's standards. Okay, let's see what the luggage space is like in a W123. Now, keep in mind, this was the taxi of choice in Germany throughout the 70s, 80s, and then in North Africa all the way up to today, so you'd expect it to be pretty big, and it's massive. It's absolutely huge. There are these deep craters on both left and right sides, so you can even put more additional space back here. The floor is flat, and underneath the floor, you'll even find a full-size spare tire. Because once again, if you get stuck in the Moroccan desert, you're gonna wanna make sure that you can get that tire fixed and get you out of that sticky situation. Have you ever tried to change a tail light on your brand new car? It's probably going to be quite expensive and not all that easy, but on this old Mercedes, it is super easy and it is an engineering masterpiece. This should be mandatory on all cars. So how it works is I've got this little panel here, and there are two little thumb knobs, one on the left and one on the right, and wait for this. The whole panel comes out in less than 10 seconds, and I have access to every bulb, the brake lights, the turn signals, the parking lights. They're all right here. Just pop them out, pop a new one in, slap it back together, and I'm ready to go and back to legal. So the first thing you notice coming inside this old Mercedes is, well, the steering wheel, which is incredibly large. I have a feeling that diameter-wise, it's actually bigger than the exterior wheels, which is great if your power steering pump fails and you have to steer it manually. Of course, it won't because it's an old Mercedes, but check this out. Good old-fashioned German horn in the middle there. So the ignition in this car is actually in the dashboard, it's not in the column. It's angled pretty funny with a handy little cutout here, but I've got my old school Mercedes key, which is patterned with a hole in the middle. I put the key in, turn ignition on, and it's gonna buzz, and I have to wait till this glow plug light goes off. Now, being a diesel, an old diesel in fact, it has glow plugs, so the engine has to warm up a little bit before I can crank it over. Foot on brake. Ah yes, like a gravel pit in a tin can. All right guys, now I have been lying to you a little bit about this car in general because there are some bits that are notoriously unreliable, this area here being one of them. This is a 300D turbo diesel. This was a top-of-the-line car here in the United States, which means we have automatic climate control, which was cool for 1982, but this is a horrible system, mainly because it's powered by about 18 vacuum lines that come off the back of a control module. Now, how it works is you set the temperature using this little wheel on the left, you set your fan speed, low, high, or automatic, and then you set where the air is going to go, and it distributes the air, and you should be nice and cool or nice and hot depending on what you set it to. In reality, it leaks vacuum and then it doesn't work, or the air conditioning fails, or one of the little mechanisms in here fails. It's over-engineered to the nth degree, and it's not very good. Now, the other funny thing is when you push one of the directional buttons, the other one pops out like whack-a-mole, which is very fun to play with. And the other weird thing is this wheel on the left here, which is in Celsius. And being an American in America, I have no idea what 18 degrees Celsius is. It's probably pretty cold, and I have no idea what 26 degrees Celsius is. I imagine that's like 800 degrees Fahrenheit, but you just gotta kind of figure it out. Or maybe I'm just not classy enough for this system. Now, if you're watching this abroad, you may remember with fond memories your manual windows in your 200D or 240D. However, being a 300D here in the US, I've got power windows on all four sides, and they're down here in the middle by the shifter. I also have a little fader adjustment for the radio for some reason, nowhere near the radio, and my hazard switch. Plus this little unlabeled button, that's your rear window lockout for passengers. I'm probably beating a dead horse here, but the absolute best part of any old Mercedes, oh, it's so good. The door closed thump is just legendary. Now, if you look at the actual mechanism, it's pretty interesting how it works. There's like a pin that goes into a hole that aligns everything up. And you also have a nice chrome plate here, and it's all very classy and very tidy. But the end result, of course, is there's no better sound in the entire world, I think. I mean, if I could just have a mixtape of this. Some other funny stuff about this interior we should talk about. This was one heck of an expensive car back in 1982, and you didn't get power windows. Nope, that's a total lie. You didn't get power mirrors, and you didn't get power seats. You also get this really itty-bitty tiny door handle. For such a hefty door with major crash protection in the side, why would they put on such a tiny, tiny door handle? This is also a funny switch in this old Mercedes. It's clearly like a little sun, which means it's a dome light, but when you turn it on, it only turns on the rear dome light. The front dome light, you have to turn on manually with a separate switch. Next up is this power moonroof. Of course, it fits perfectly because it's an old Mercedes, but it also works really cool. Now, this is a 300D model, and like we've been talking about, it's pretty loaded. Elsewhere in the world, you might have a manual sunroof, but not this car. It's an electric moonroof. I push a button and it just glides back with the utmost of ease. You even have an integrated deflector here for the wind, so you don't get too much buffeting. Check out this gas cap, guys. If I open the lid, pretty standard Mercedes gas cap, but you'll see there's actually, well, first of all, diesel only, but you'll see in here, it shows you the recommended PSI for the tires. Plus it'll also give you some winter and summer tips. One of my favorite things about this box on wheels is the safety. Now, by modern standards, it doesn't have airbags, of course, but back in the day, it was one of the safest cars for sale because it had crumple zones. One of the earlier applications, actually, you'll see in the front here where the engine is, it would crumple in the event of a collision, taking the impact and not spreading it here into the passenger cell. Plus, the other thing you notice is that this car is really long. It's very narrow by modern standards, but it's quite the walk from the back all the way to the front. The other weird thing by modern standards are these wheels. These are called bottle cap style wheels because they look like bottle caps, and they're only 14 inches in diameter, which is tiny. But what that means is you've got a nice thick sidewall here on the tire, which gives it a cushy ride. Plus it has an absurdly good turning radius. Okay, I'm gonna go full hard left. That is absurd. That is so tight. Clearly this is a top-notch job. This is horrible. It's about 31 feet which if you're watching abroad is about 10 centimeters. So yeah, really, really good turning circle. Okay, so being such a long car, you'd expect the rear seat to be absolutely huge, but it isn't. It's actually really pretty tight, especially with the seat move back. Now, there are some really cool things back here, such as these nets in the back of both seats, really classy, and these cool ashtrays that fold out from the top to hide away your ashes. I mean, it is a Mercedes from the 1980s after all. Now, this is also kind of funky. Everything in this car is just a little bit weird how it works, like this armrest that folds out from the bottom with a super satisfying clunk and then folds back in the same way. Plus, you'll see this really neat armrest for the front passenger that only extends from the driver's seat. There's no connection with the passenger seat. Nice little design touches that go a long way. This switch is carried over to just about every Mercedes, including new ones, and it is of course the light switch. So to turn my lights on, I turn it all the way right. Up is off, I have running lights, but you also see a little P with two little arrows. Now these are your parking lamps. It's a very German thing, but here's how it works. If I'm parked on the right side of the road in Germany at night, I'll flick on my left parking lamps. Now that'll only turn on the left side of lights, and that'll alert people that I'm on the right side of the road. Look out. I can also turn it to the right parking lights if I'm parked on the left side of the road. Once again, alert motorists where I am so they don't hit me. Now, if I turn my headlights on and pull out the switch itself, I engage my yellow fog lights. Being an American spec car, this one has these big American bumpers and round headlights. I actually don't hate the look. I know a lot of you guys do though. But about these headlights, the outer ones here are your high beams and low beams, and the inner ones here are those incredible yellow fog lights. It was once thought that yellow would cut through the fog better than clear or white, hence why this car has bright yellow fog lights. They're not even like a little bit tinted. I mean, you see this car coming at you at night with yellow on, and you'll definitely notice it. So there you have it, guys. The Mercedes W123, in my opinion, the pinnacle of Mercedes engineering and quality in terms of perfection. Now I want you guys to let me know in the comments below if I'm right or not, and there are a ton of other little things we could have talked about. It's just a really well thought out car that's beautifully made and is beautiful to drive. As always, I'm Tommy with the Fastlane Car and the Fastlane Classics. Go back to TFLcar.com for more news, views, and real world ancient Mercedes reviews.